Now I move, so the next speaker I'd like to introduce Professor Alexandre Krainik. He's was president of the French Society of Neurology, and now he's vice president of the French Society of Radiology, in charge of international affairs, and member of the Diagnostic Committee of the European Society of Neurology. He would introduce with the topic of the generative artificial intelligence in the neurodegenerative disease. Please.
Okay, thank you for the kind invitation, and thank you for this privilege to talk about generative AI in dementia and Alzheimer's disease, for example. Then here are my disclosure. And well, AI is a story, to quote Martin Luther King, is "I have a dream." We all dream about AI. Patient dreams about AI. Radiologist dream about AI. Well, neurologist, of course, dream about AI. Well, neuroscientists also. Let's say startup manager, they love AI. Well, business angel love AI as well. Also, director of hospital, they love AI. They'd like to replace all those medical doctors by AI software, and of course our president as well. Then you see there's also a dress code in AI, open shirt, no necktie, a little bird, and let's go for AI. Well, in radiology, let's say AI may improve access to modality. It may also improve image acquisition, speed, spatial resolution, contrast, denoising. Now it's a part of our daily life. It may also improve image analysis, allow quantification, exhaustivity, and follow-up. Possibly, we hope that it may improve interpretation. Up right now, let's say it's work in progress. But up right now, the integration is not yet performed, and it doesn't really improve care as far as we know immediately. Let's say from this, this table that refers to the efficiency of the different level of technical change, that let's say now AI is at the level to manage the diagnostic accuracies. And we're at this step of the story, we're not dealing with cost or years of life or that would improve the quality of life. It's not yet, but let's say we try to estimate how far AI is able to do as we do. Just to have little estimate in mind. Actually, there was a study which is quite old right now. It was carried during the COVID time, and it mentioned that only one software out of 6 that were already sold for medical purpose, were scientifically evaluated. Only 1 out of 6. The other one is just a sale. Of course, they were CE marked or FDA approved, but mostly they didn't have a real scientific evaluation. Anyhow, to focus on the neurodegenerative disease, we will have to take into account the different abnormalities we may face. Of course, it's like encephalitis. There are numerous of presentation. You can look at the morphometry to try to estimate the neural loss, and then you estimate the brain volume change. You can also look at the signal disorder in the gray matter, or the hyperintensity or hypointensity or susceptibility weighted image in the white matter as well. You look for the hyperintensity around the ventricle, in the subcortical area, and of course, you have a numerous functional change. First, on the morphometry, and this is what AI works most of the time right now in neurodegenerative disease. There's a wide spectrum of brain volume change in all those diseases. You see here the most common, and with a little experience, you may here identify a reduction of volume of the hippocampus only. Here you don't see anything. Here you have a global atrophy of the temporal area. And here it's, let's say, it's quite large in the insular area and temporal area as well. And here you don't see much change, possibly something in the insula. So anyway, we have, with a certain habit, the ability to recognize a certain diagnosis. And of course, we need all those clinical data, because when we don't have this, we can say many mistakes. Anyway, we are used to quote the atrophy of the hippocampus. We can use a Shelton scale from the normal to the severe, and right now we don't do it, but maybe in the coming years we're going to have a look at the thinner anatomy of the hippocampus to describe different subtype of Alzheimer or late or frontotemporal dementia and so on. Anyway, then with a little habit, you can distinguish the different form of atrophy. Here, AD with small hippocampus. Here it's a mixed lesion, and here is the frontotemporal, sorry, it's an Alzheimer's disease, but with a primary progressive aphasia. And here is a semantic variant of a frontotemporal dementia. Of course, temporal area are not only, you also have frontal atrophy. Sometimes here, like in frontotemporal dementia, it's obvious. Sometimes it's not that clear. In AD, it's most of the time in the parietal area, and in corticobasal degeneration, you usually have an enlargement of the an asymmetrical atrophy in the parietal lobes. And in Alzheimer's disease, you can estimate the gradient of frontoparietal atrophy, and well, when it's rather in the frontal area, it's very suggestive of frontotemporal dementia. When they're rather in the parietal area, is very suggestive of Alzheimer's disease. And when it's in between, usually there's a mixed disease with a high load of vascular disease as well, or in Lewy body disease, for instance. Of course, you also have the insula. The atrophy of the insula has been advocated to well, suggest the dementia with Lewy body. It's not that obvious. Sometimes it's much more important in the frontotemporal dementia with semantic variants, for instance. But well, it has been mentioned that insular atrophy is suggestive of dementia with Lewy body. And of course, it's not only the brain, the cerebrum. It can be also the midbrain, the brainstem, and even the cerebellum that may help you to distinguish all those neurodegenerative diseases. And I mean, looking at volume change is very important, including in basal ganglia. Then how AI may help to characterize brain volume change in all those diseases. Let's say one of the common approach, which is performed by this company and numerous other, is to perform a segmentation and to report some volumes for each side, and you can decide, you can label all the volume, frontal, temporal, parietal area, and so on, and try to report these values for age, and you can locate your individual in the middle of the curve or out of the curve, and you can even follow up this patient over time. Well, here is a case, for instance, it's a quite old lady. She had cognitive disorder with dissociative syndrome, memory impairment. Well, she has some fluctuation, sleep disorder, but she doesn't have any extrapyramidal syndrome. Well, let's say we have a clinical hypothesis, and the idea is to say, okay, there's an atrophy. When you compare, of course, to someone of 25 or even 45 or 50, you look, there's a temporal atrophy. But the temporal atrophy, is that normal for age? You see also here frontal atrophy, parietal atrophy. Let's say there's a global atrophy, but does it have any specific features that could be related to a specific disease? And when you report all those values, see that, okay, there's an atrophy, especially when you compare to younger age, but the atrophy is in the normal range according to different region of interest. Then in a certain way, you can state that using this software that you don't have a specific pattern of atrophy. In this case, it was a dementia with Lewy body disease. Okay, and on the follow-up, sometimes when you have some value which are at the inferior border of the normal, the follow-up may state that the increase of the the decrease of the volume, which is faster than the normal range, is also an element to state for neurodegenerative disease. Then, well, the challenge for AI in morphometry is to provide some exhaustive description of the brain, something we don't really do. We have an overall view. We can focus a few words on certain structure, but we don't clearly measure the volume of every structure at the level a computer can do. Then computers, they can do segmentation, they can provide volumes of the gray matter, the white matter, the CSF, even the brain vessel. You can define different regions of interest, and you can even segment a different lesion, the number and the load of the hyperintensities on T2, and you can provide absolute value or normalized value as a percentage of the intracranial volume. And from this, you can compare your data, your individual data, to a population-based. And then it provides you a report. And I know that several software can go forward and even can write a report for you. You can, of course, monitor this brain change because you can do it for once, but doing several times, it's better to give a computer to do it. And ideally, it should be independent from the scanner, from the interpreter, from the subject itself, from the software. We should have, real values that are reliable. And of course, all those data could be incorporated in the DICOM format. Hello. Volumetry, is that a robust art? We all rely on several software, but is this really robust? This is a work we conducted with a PhD student. She took several series of subjects who travel. We call them traveling subject database. They are public. You can download them. There's a manual test study and the SR-PBS study. Also subject here is 5 healthy subjects, here is 9 healthy subjects were scanned on several machines. Here 3T on 10 different sites, and here again 3T on about 12 different sites. Then you expect for the same subject during a short period of time to have the same brain volume, and then that's what was tested. And actually the idea is to test the reproducibility across machines and software. And to define the reproducibility, you can evaluate the dice index, which is an overlap parameter. You can also evaluate the Hausdorff distance. It's the maximum distance between the difference of overlap, the interclass correlation, or even the coefficient of variation. What you like to be reproducible is to have a very high dice and a very good overlap. You need to have a smaller Hausdorff distance, meaning that the difference in the overlap is the smallest as possible. You'd like a wonderful interclass correlation and a low coefficient of variation. And when you compare 3 different software which are open source, such as AssemblyNet, FastSurfer, and even FreeSurfer, you see that the performance of all the software are not identical, and one of them has the better reproducibility, called AssemblyNet, and FreeSurfer, which is very popular for more than 20 years, is not so reproducible. Well, then can we go further, given this that you have to pay attention on the quality of your segmentation? Can we go further to diagnosis? Then, well, we can try to perform a segmentation. You choose the best software you have. The idea is to generate a certain number of regions of interest, to decrease the number of parameters. Then you can generate population atlas. You can project all those values as a nonlinear way on a 2D or a 3D or even 4D space for each individual. You filter, you remove the outlier, and then finally you can obtain different clusters. Clusters that are, you can mention, and those clusters can be, it depends on what you look for a cluster. It can be the machines, it can be age, it can be sex, it can be disease. Well, anyway, finally, you take your atlas. This is your, let's say, healthy population, or not even healthy population. It can be your Alzheimer's disease population, and you will try to test one individual. Is it in the range, out of the range? Anyway, you're going to generate a numerical twin with the neighbors, and then from the neighbors, it's this is very close from the original, but it's influenced by the neighbors, and then you will look at the difference from the neighbors and from the original as well. And finally, you will have all those density plots related. For instance, here would be the controls, here would be the Alzheimer, and here would be different type of frontotemporal dementia. Here is an example. Well, I see if there's a little videos. Oh yeah. Then you can implement in this kind of software. You put your individuals. You have different. Let's say clouds, and you see your individuals in this area, which is related rather to frontotemporal dementia. You can even look closer to try to give a probability, and you look here, you have your individuals, you look all around, you see that all the normal subjects, which should be green, are not that far, but the closer are black. Black are related to Parkinson's disease, and then you can estimate that the risk of being a Parkinson's disease is higher because of the distance is smaller with the closest neighbors. And you can even have a look on which area of interest, oops, sorry. I try to make it work. I'm not sure. Anyway, you can even locate, where does the problem comes from. We performed an initial study on about 80 patients with only the 3D-T1, and actually we had about 60 right diagnoses for AD, FTD, and even Parkinson's disease, only based on the analysis of this 3D-T1. There was no clinical information, only looking, only segmenting and analyzing. You had about 2/3 of right diagnosis, meaning there's more than 1/3 of wrong diagnosis. Okay. The fact is that there's a problem. The initial approach was that the software couldn't say, I don't know. And this is a major problem. They only always give an answer, even if the answer is wrong. And that's why, in a certain way, there was more than 1/3 of wrong diagnosis. When you add an additional feeder, such as nigrosome loss, for instance, on SWI, you turn your 40% of wrong diagnosis in 30% of unknown diagnosis and 10% of wrong diagnosis. And all this is still a work in progress. Well, this is just a glimpse at MRI change in neurodegenerative disease, because we don't do only morphometry. We'll do, for instance, SWI. We'll look at nigrosomes here that are lost in Parkinson's disease but are preserved in AD, for instance. We also look at neuromelanin, which is preserved in AD, but which is lost in dementia with Lewy body or Parkinson's disease as well. We also look at white matter hyperintensity, and then we can deal with all these vascular disorder. We can distinguish small cerebral artery disease, CDZIL, or even other white matter abnormalities, such as those observed in cerebellar multiple systemic atrophy, or even related to vascular Parkinsonism. And of course, when you look at microbleed, you can distinguish superficial microbleed related to cerebral amyloid angiopathy from those related to chronic hypertension. And you see SWI also provide numerous additional information in addition to the white matter, to the flare abnormality, in addition to the atrophy and so on. And we don't consider perfusion change that can also reveal difference across population. Whoops, sorry. And then it was only, let's say, a taste of the variety of all this disease, because, of course, people are not always coming with a label mentioning they have a neurodegenerative disease. There's a lot of differential diagnosis, from strokes, from infection, from toxic, from trauma, from tumors, and so on. Then to remember AI, there's a large hope, but there's also a large fantasy. And my advice to give you is first acquire clinical imaging experience before having data imaging experience, because let's say it will be quite hard to discuss any diagnosis if you don't have any experience in imaging. AI allows to quantify structures, to see what we can't see, and obviously it allows to see what we can see and also to see what we don't want to see. AI is very sensitive to technological change, such as acquisition, segmentation, and also analysis and classification. It will improve acquisition, and now all the vendors in the room next door stand on their machines that their machine are empowered by AI to improve the quality of image, and AI is there. Let's say AI may enrich image analysis, but it needs to say, I don't know. And of course, like all other software, it needs clinical validation. Today, I think that full data integration remains quite far, but let's say it's moving. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Krainik, for excellent presentation about the AI in neurodegenerative disease. So if anyone have questions, we discuss at the end of the session now.